Picture this. You pull up the latest viral story on your phone. Maybe it's a celebrity caught in a social media feud or a politician whose private messages expose deeply held secrets. We devour these stories with a morbid fascination. There's a fall from grace. There's exposure. There's a public outcry. It's a stark reminder that privacy is a precious thing and that a lack of boundaries can have devastating consequences.
Welcome to another episode of Amplified Marriage. I'm Natalie.
I'm Brian.
You hear us say this every podcast, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, grab a coffee, grab a tea, a snack, some popcorn, cozy blanket. We're so glad you joined us for our chat today.
Absolutely. Today, we are actually going back to a topic that we've discussed.
Well, briefly
discussed. We had 2 episodes in our very first season, a long time ago, on boundaries in particular. And we're going to be discussing today a deeper dive into boundaries,
and the
going a
different
lot
types.
further, and the different types.
Yep.
We talked about physical and emotional, and we want to get really deep into this because we have some topics coming up. We have some counselors that we're going to be bringing on to the episode, onto the podcast, just to have a chat with us about boundaries in regarding children moving forward. So we have some really good things going on. We have been away. I know it's been a long time since we've had a podcast, but we've
January.
Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, we
had a lot happen.
Yeah, we had a lot happen.
So right after our last podcast, the end of January.
Near the end of January. We're getting ready. The week that we would have recorded, we had
to put our dog down. So if you're a dog person, we had a golden retriever. Her name is Molly. And she just had a really aggressive nasal cancer. And so the prognosis was quite grim, actually, by the time that we had found out.
Yeah.
She was supposed to have been gone long before she did.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful to God for answering our prayers and the kids' prayers, for sustaining her over Christmas.
Yeah.
That was kind of the big thing, was please let her not die over Christmas.
Yeah.
And I didn't want her to die here because that's just traumatizing.
Yeah.
So,
and then in the middle of all that, we had, right after that happened, the play. We had the play.
No, you went to Mexico before the play.
Oh, that's right. I had to go to Mexico. We have about 10 churches in Mexico that our church in Canada has planted over the last 30 years. And so my lead pastor and I had to go down and make a trip just to connect with all the pastors after COVID. And then we had the play come up, which is 2 weeks of just consistent, every evening, every day, all day.
Intense.
It's intense. And so with 6 performances or 5 performances, and then tech week before that, and then church, and then we got into Easter and baptisms, and it's just been a really busy time. But we're back.
Yes. Oh, my word. Long story short, we've had a lot go on in the last 2 months. And I know that Brian as well, just don't want to put out content for the sake of shoot. Our week is here. We really want to make sure that we spend some time thinking about it, talking it through, praying about it, so that it's valuable to you listeners. So in a nutshell,
that's been the last while. So we want to talk about boundaries in marriages and boundaries in relationships. And some of the things we're going to be talking about today are going to be tools in your toolbox that will be good for more than just your marriage.
Yeah.
But we are going to focus on the marriage because we're a relationship podcast, and that's where we want to go with this. And so there's a reason that there are boundaries, and there's a reason that there's 1,000 books on boundaries, Christian books, non-Christian books, that there is just so much content there's about boundaries. There's a reason, because the person who doesn't want a healthy boundary is the one that struggles with boundaries.
I would agree.
The one that wants to put a boundary on it generally is doing it for good reasons, like healthy reasons, and
or at least trying to themselves in a
There
healthy
is
way.
such thing as unhealthy manipulative boundaries that people are putting in place to control you, to get you to do certain things. But that's not where we want to go today. Today we want to talk about healthy marriages need to have boundaries
and healthy
boundaries. And the reason being is that those will protect the relationship. Mm-hmm. They'll protect the well-being of the marriage. They'll protect the connection to each other and that connection to your children if you happen to have children.
Exactly. Like, think about it like you're building a fence around your house, and it's not to shut myself out from whatever's beyond the fence.
Yeah.
But it really is to define my personal space.
Yeah.
And it's up to me to decide what I choose to let in and who I choose to let in and who and what I choose to keep out.
Right. And if you look at any type of where you're going to grow the most, there's stability, there's security.
Yes.
There's a direction you need to go. So boundaries, they really are there to just help you grow. And they help you change, and they help you do that within the safety of the specific rules, specific parameters.
Exactly.
Right. And so
I just thought of this. It's like, when you're in a garden
mm-hmm.
and there are weeds, and weeds will grow anywhere.
Yeah, right.
Right? Toxic people, unhealthy people will be everywhere surrounding us in our lives. But and they will definitely choke out the good growth. Right. And the good progress and the good decisions that you're making if you're not careful.
Right.
So when we think of boundaries, we're essentially doing a weeding of our own inner self.
Right.
And we'll get into we'll break it down. I hope that made sense.
It does make sense. Absolutely. And so you're looking at this is the way that I've been using it the last while, is that boundaries are like guardrails on a mountain road. They prevent you from creating off course during the tough times.
We live in a mountainous region, and there's one section where there's what are they called? Vineyards. Oh my Lord.
I didn't know what you were trying to say, so I couldn't help
you. Up on a ridge.
Right.
And the road to get there is a little sketchy.
Yeah.
Part of it has somewhat of a guardrail. And when you think like you're climbing the mountain doing switchbacks on the road, and it's literally one lane up, one lane down, and it's really narrow, there is a huge section where there is absolutely no protection from the edge.
Yes.
And it is so incredibly nerve-wracking. It doesn't matter how many times I drive it. It's scary, and I'm holding my breath for part of it because there are no guardrails. I really learned to appreciate the roads that have the guardrails.
Yeah, you're also the person that, as I'm driving and I get near a truck that has logs on the back, they're like, Brian, speed up. Brian, speed up. I don't want to be next. Brian, speed up.
I don't like it.
I know you don't like it.
Behind a semi-truck. I don't like being beside a semi-truck.
I know. It's really funny because I'm moving. I'm actually moving quickly, but you're still like, no, we can't be here.
Exactly. Right. I'm creating boundaries between myself and unsafe situations. Do you see what I did there?
I see what you did there. Right. And so there are different types of boundaries. You want to start going through them? Sure.
I mean, as we're going through the list, we might forget one, or we might not have even thought of one. So if you're hearing us go through this and you're like, gosh, they didn't talk about this, please let us know, because this is not...
So here's the thing. We want to lay the foundation for these are some the types of boundaries. The reason for the boundaries is because they provide guardrails,
right?
But they also help you cultivate a relationship of trust, of love, of care, of maturity, stability, security, all of those things. Those things are important in the relationship, and so that's what a boundary does. A boundary isn't to manipulate, control, to get them to do what you want. And we'll talk about that some as we move forward.
Exactly. So. And just a precursor, some of these ones, like as we were going through them, really felt like they needed to be a separate, or not a separate, but like we needed to create a podcast specifically on certain ones of these. So we'll let you know about that. All right. First one, physical boundaries.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you might be like, well, what is that? That is essentially respecting personal space.
Mm-hmm.
And being comfortable, my being able to articulate my comfort in, how you're touching me. Physical touch plays a part of it. It's not just, we do the 5 love languages and physical touch, and everyone just assumes that just means sexual contact, and it doesn't.
Yeah, it's funny because as soon as you mention intimacy anywhere,
Yeah,
they
like,
mean
"Is
sex.
No.
Because I really 100% believe that the world has taken what God created for good, sex, which is between man and woman, to be good and healthy and whole.
Yeah.
He took that, and the world's perverted it to mean that the only way you can emotionally, intimately connect with someone else is through sex. Sex is a bonus, but there is definitely more to intimacy than just sex.
That's right.
And so,
like public displays of affection.
So when we talk about it, we're talking about
when
it.
we talk about physical boundaries, we're talking about I'm a physical person in my environment, and you are a physical person in your environment. And how do we, how do we connect?
Yeah, you make it sound so boring.
Public displays of affection. I mean, there are boundaries there. There are, not everywhere is appropriate to display public displays.
That's fair.
Right? And I say that because, if you're traveling, not just for you to be comfortable with your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend in a public area, but also translates to, like, if you're traveling, there are certain countries that prohibit certain public displays of affection.
Some people are PDA people and some people aren't PDA people, and you need to discuss that with each other.
But yes, communicating your level of
comfort
when it comes to public displays of affection.
Absolutely.
And regarding your personal space.
Emotional boundaries. Communicating your feelings openly while respecting each other and respecting each other's emotional needs.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm not responsible.
You're not responsible for your partner's happiness. Right?
That might seem mind-blowing to some people.
Yeah. Well, especially, like, do you remember the movie Jerry Maguire?
Yes.
When that movie came out, Jerry Maguire's like, you complete me. No, there's not one person in the whole world that will completely. Will they make you a little more apt to enjoy things? They can finish your sentences. They think the same way you do in certain things. And there's no way that there's one person in the whole world that will complete you.
That's right.
And then there was this whole culture built around. I remember saying, me and Natalie joking around when we were early dating, oh, you complete me. Like, it's such a weird thing. And then
it's the love goggles.
Do you want to be responsible for another person's happiness based on your behavior? Because that's really what it is. If I'm responsible for your happiness, that means my behavior cannot trigger you, offend you, hurt you, even poke you in any way, shape, or form. And I'm responsible for that. That means I would spend so much time trying to control my behavior to make you happy that I would be unhappy.
That's right. Speaking of controlling one's behavior, you have to be so incredibly mindful that everyone expresses emotion differently.
Absolutely.
And your relationship should be a safe space for you to express that emotion however it needs to come out. I need to express my emotion. And if I keep it in, it's volatile. Mm-hmm. I have to let it out. And now there's also an air of responsibility on how I choose to let that out. But I have to, not that I need your permission to release that, but there has to be an understanding of, just because you don't process emotion the same way I do doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to.
Oh, that's right? A really good point.
So when we talk about emotional boundaries, it is not sequestering someone's need to emotional vent or like an emotional output.
Right. So here's the thing is that, like, I would compare it to this. I know a couple men in my life that are quite emotional. Like, emotional as in they're
emotionally in tune?
Well, they're emotionally in tune. I actually really think they do. They're really emotionally in tune with themselves, but they're also really like outwardly expressive with their emotions, right? Like, a guy I know will hear a song and it'll just hit him in his heart. And this is the thing. Awesome. He's an expressive, manly guy. Like, and he's super manly, but he's expressive on the outside. And so that's not how I express emotion.
Right.
Right. But that's how he does.
Right.
And if I expected him to, if he expected me to do what he was going to do, and I was expecting him to do how I express emotion, we would both just be choked. And it's the same thing in our marriages, is that Natalie was like totally expresses the anger or the frustration or the whatever's happening,
joy, sadness, whatever,
it completely different than I will, and I can't have the expectation that you do it the same way that I do, because my way is just completely different.
And for many years, it was like that.
Yeah, we were expecting each other to. Well, the love languages thing.
Yeah, and I was expecting him like, gosh, you're stone cold, and you're just right. You're you
still joke around like that, but it's not that I'm emotionless at all. Like, I feel things just as deep as the next guy.
Right. You're just not as open about it.
Well, with you, but I'm also like, I don't need to process the same way that you do.
That's right. You are open with me about your feelings, but you just don't outwardly express it. Well, in the same way.
Yeah, right. And I'm also not going to let the emotions control me, and so I logically think my way through things.
Right. As an emotional outputter, that doesn't mean that we're not, or that we're allowing our emotions to control us, because we are processing them outwardly.
Yeah.
So I just needed to say that. Because I know I'm not alone.
I'm not saying this about anyone else. I'm saying for me, I just don't. Yeah, there's some things.
Clarified.
Okay. The next one is social boundaries,
and this includes social media boundaries. This is our life now, is social media.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting.
So when we think of social boundaries, our social settings. So this is our friends, our family,
right?
Like extended family, in-laws, that whole gamut. And then the social media element of it is, what am I choosing to let in? Remember, we talked about this fence around our house scenario. What am I choosing to engage in on social media?
Yeah.
Are these healthy?
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so I think setting boundaries with, communications on social media, because, we were talking about this earlier. What you put out there is out there.
Right.
And you might delete it and think, whew, it's gone. It ain't gone. It's not gone.
Yeah.
It can be retracted.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? So I think making sure that, with the intro that Brian was saying about these scenarios that celebrities and politicians and people who are just out there on social media have, and in social settings, can be really detrimental.
100% it can.
If you do not have strict boundaries in place for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I agree.
Children.
And we have something in our house too, where our kids that are under 18, we're allowed to look at their phone whenever they want. Natalie has access to my phone, my emails, my church email, anything that she needs at any time. And it's not that she doesn't trust me, and it's not that I don't trust her. It's because I don't want to give her any reason to doubt or to have shade cast.
Right.
Right.
Like my kids use my phone a lot.
Yeah, my kids might. Yeah.
And I'm not out looking at weird, gross, scandalous, whatever things, but I'm also aware, what are they, if they're like, oh, Mom, I don't, what was, on Instagram or whatever, and they open my Instagram and it's just a bunch of crap on there.
Yeah.
I also am mindful of that.
Absolutely.
Right. So like making sure that what I'm choosing to take in on a social media element is appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. So going from social, we go to financial boundaries.
Well, did we talk about I know we really focused on the social media part, but just the social boundaries of really making sure that you have things in place. And we talked about this at Christmas time when it was dealing with family and the expectations of your space and invading that space, really making sure that the people, whether they're family or not, healthy boundaries as far as like, no. And if you have that relationship where your family can just come and waltz in whenever they please, and then good on you. We don't. No. And we won't.
Right.
And though we have an excellent relationship with Brian's family, there's still respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, for our boundaries.
Yeah. So social boundaries, moving on to financial boundaries. We're creating budgets. You're discussing the spending habits. There's oftentimes in a relationship a spender and a saver. And you want to decide as much as you can ahead of time. And it's interesting because there's two of the main reasons that people get divorced are finances and lack of communication. it's funny because it's a lack of communication about finances that leads to the fact that they're not communicating, so they end up getting divorced because they're not talking about that. And so
sex is the third one, just saying.
Yeah, well, and I'm 100% sure that those stats have probably changed by now. Things are just different, but the financial boundaries, you need to communicate about your boundaries.
Yes, and if you have addictive patterns in regarding to finances, right, where
you're going to get married and he has $30,000 in credit card debt you didn't know about.
Exactly, right. You need to really talk about that. Student loan debts.
Yeah.
A gambling problem.
Yeah, right.
Right? Like
a weed problem. You're just spending $100 a week on smoking weed or cigarettes or cigars or
right. So these are huge issues. And then some financial struggles end up coming later on, such as fertility issues and things like that. And so you can't plan. Well, I mean, I would plan worst case scenario, but I don't think I'm the norm population. I think the majority of people plan for the future, but they don't take every single thing that could go wrong into consideration when they're doing so.
Right.
So, I mean, we do a zero-based budget. So our money is allotted to specific areas. And we have it all listed, and we work out of that. So we work within our 2-week paychecks, and we categorize and we organize where the money goes. And like, this is how much we have for groceries, and this is for gas, and this is for this and that and the other. And that's it. The rest, is credit card debt, and there's savings, and that's it for the next pay till the next pay period. Right. So, we haven't always done a zero-based budget. We have tried multiple different things, and hopefully this will stick and this will, kind of work, but ever evolving, right?
Right.
We have to be talking about it.
So financial boundaries, moving on to, and our next one is going to be talking about setting and maintaining these boundaries. What we're going to do is we're going to move, and this is going to end up being 2, because I feel like the next, this is going to be 2 episodes. So the next one is going to be on the 3 that we're looking to talk about is communication, sexual boundaries, and spiritual boundaries. And those are really important, and we don't want to move too quickly.
Right.
And so we're just going to talk about maintaining and take a few minutes here and just talk about how we set some of these boundaries. So Natalie, how would we set a really good boundary in a marriage? What have we done?
I mean, I feel like we sound like a broken record, but open communication. And we honestly had to learn how to communicate properly.
Right.
And we tried all different kinds of methods. If you've been a long time listener, that didn't work. So we had to, just be honest.
Yeah. You can't do it without honesty, right?
We don't have all the answers. We don't have all the right language or lingo to be able to express ourselves perfectly.
No.
Every single time.
Right.
But one thing that we've aimed to be is clear and direct, and clearly state the why to the boundary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And being as clear as we can. And there's nothing wrong with asking for clarification.
Right.
And we have.
Yeah.
Like it just avoids an argument potentially later on down the road. It avoids mixed messages.
Which is a good tool to have in your tool belt anyway, and then in communication with your friends. Like when I'm having a discussion with my friend Nathan, we'll be talking about like theology, or we'll talk about how we hate this movie or whatever it happens to be. We're sitting around talking, and he'll be like, no, what do you mean by that? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't understand what you meant by that. Or like even identifying the feeling, like, hey, it sounds like you're being frustrated.
Yeah,
by
exactly.
That. Like, to say, and then it gives you an open-ended question to ask, like, hey, this is the thing that I'm feeling right now. And you're like, oh, well, he or she is like, I see that. I could say that, and it sounds like you're mad. What are we mad about? Right. And knowing that, like, I'm secure enough in the relationship now, I would say that when I ask that question, hey, what are you mad? I know that it's not me. It used to be like I'd be sitting in the corner and be like, man,
well,
what did I do?
Well, if you don't know, I'm not telling you.
And that is
familiar.
That is a cultural marriage thing that needs to be killed. And women, you should never do that to men. And men, don't try and guess, because you get yourself into more trouble.
And if you're the reverse, and men
Or if you don't know
your man is doing that, then that's equally
that's stupid.
That's
Please
a
don't
no-no,
do it.
and don't do that. And it's not up to your
never in the history
wife to try to figure that out.
Never in the history of humankind has there ever been a person that's been able to read another person's mind. And so it's actually impossible. So you want to be clear, direct. You want to respect I love that. Respect your spouse's boundaries.
Duh.
What is
so
Mark?
Easy.
Mark Gungor all the time. He says this to guys. Mark Gungor, Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage, amazing training. He says, be nice to the girl.
Yep.
And
can I say, be nice to the guy?
Be nice to the guy, yeah. Respect the man, love the woman, do what you got to do, but you have to have boundaries and you need to respect them. And there are boundaries in every relationship. Even if they're not healthy boundaries, there's boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Like you could have like 10 really good boundaries in each other's relationships and your guys are just flying, but then there's 3 that are twisted that you just don't know are like, oh, that's not the right boundary.
Exactly.
Right? But they could be good boundaries. It could be bad boundaries, but you want to respect each other.
And hopefully the not so healthy boundaries, there's an awareness, there's a self-awareness, whether it's through counseling or someone brings it to your attention or you come to that self-realization, it's not a lost cause.
Right.
But you don't get, how do I word this? You don't have to like it.
Yeah.
Because the boundary is not about you. The boundary is about me.
Yeah. I would say, too, that a common thing in marriage is that there's some things in our relationship that we disagree on, but they're not like major deal breaker things. It's not like I want to be a different religion than you, or I think it's okay to like be a heavy drinker, and you're like, no, that's not good, or like, you know, like just there's things that we just disagree on that are minor. I think for the most part we always agree on the majors, and when we're working through these things, like we may not agree, but we can say to each other, I agree to disagree with you on this.
Yeah, and let's talk about that word agreement. It's not about trying to beat my point to death to get you to finally understand or to stand with me in my conviction or to stand with me in my decision. Communication's about seeking to understand.
Yeah, to understand the other person.
Right? I honestly don't care if you agree with me or not.
Sometimes.
I just want you to understand
it. Absolutely. What is
my perspective and where I'm coming from. I'm not asking you to agree with me.
No. And the thing is there's I think it's Zig Ziglar. He wrote a book and he said, most people listen with the intent to respond, not with the intent to understand.
Oh, no truer words have been spoken. Well, yes, there
probably
have.
Truer words, but
for this context,
yeah. But it is extremely true. Sometimes in an argument, I'm heated enough that I'm not listening to understand what Natalie's saying to me. I'm listening to, I have a really good response, and it's going to trump her, and I'm going to win this argument, and I'm going to be the man. And really, all it does is oftentimes it drives a wedge further between you in that exact moment.
Right, because I'm a bigger person now, and I'll just not engage.
Right.
And I won't take the bait.
Yeah, and vice versa.
This couldn't get any better.
Right.
It segues into consequences.
Well, it's
I'm
funny.
going to choose to opt out of the game that you're playing and not play it.
Yeah.
When it comes to boundaries.
And then when you're trying to bait me and I don't, and if I don't, then it'll fizzle out. But
that's right.
If I do respond and we end up in a fight for some reason, the consequences are quite evident. We're uncomfortable for a while. We could be angry. We're steamed about whatever happens to be going on. Maybe I said something I should have. And the consequences are the fact that we've just created a rift in the relationship unnecessarily because I want to respond, not to understand.
Right. And which created undue stress for both of us. And then we have children, which creates a whole set of anxiety issues for them. And
I would say that if you're looking with the intent to respond and not understand, you're more willing to overcome or to step over a boundary to get that response out, not the understanding. I'm willing to step over your boundary if I'm only wanting to respond to you, never to understand you.
Oh, okay.
Right? That make more sense?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there are consequences.
Right.
There's a lack of trust.
Yep.
So it's not just like a physical consequence of, well, I'm going into this room then. I mean, yes, sometimes I need to cool my jets and
Yeah.
I need to go into a different space, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's times where it's an emotional consequence, or there's a mental consequence, or the consequence is I've checked out,
Yeah.
or you've checked out, or we're just not even willing to talk to each other.
Right.
Those
Yeah.
are consequences.
Yeah,
You need
absolutely.
to discuss, hey, these are my concretes, and these are the things that are not going to be tolerated.
Right. And here's the thing is that we've learned as well in our marriage is that you can actually compromise.
Oh, yeah. And we've done that on a lot of different things because, you know, you just don't realize how we might get into that one more when we talked about the sexual expectations or the sexual boundaries.
Right. But boundaries do change. Like as you grow, you mature, jobs shift, hearts change. Like you grow and mature. Really, it's growing and mature.
That's the goal.
Yeah, and the boundaries will change as you have different expectations. But I love this line: "Be open to negotiation." I remember we went through the stage where we were bargaining. I'll do this if you do this.
It was, and it really
worked, and it was super fun.
It was. So yeah, it's not that, you know, we're compromising by sabotaging or like you said, not respecting and just crossing over the boundary line. This is not what we're talking about when we're saying willing to compromise.
No.
Coming to a place of that understanding and of like, is this a diehard boundary or is this one that has some wiggle room for some bargaining in there?
Yeah. That's a really good point. I think almost most things have space to negotiate, space to compromise, space to go. Most things. I wouldn't say all things because that would be kind of silly to make that an absolute. But if you are so willing to die on a certain hill, it actually causes more rift between you and your spouse.
So I think we can't generalize it though.
No.
Right? Because
it's so specific to every couple.
Exactly.
Yeah, and what your values are and what you care about and the things that you're fighting for in your relationship.
I think within each of the ones that we've talked about, and especially the ones we're going into, there are some concrete things that are non-negotiable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That was a really great conversation. It's a good start to our boundaries, eh?
Yes. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, absolutely. If you like our podcast, it really means a lot to us when you share it. You let people know about Amplified Marriage. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. You hear this say this all the time. You can go to our website at amplifiedmarriage.ca. At the bottom on the right-hand side, there is a little voicemail tab. You can actually hit that button, record a question, and we'd love to hear from you. But if you do have a topic or a question or anything you'd like to discuss, please email us, send us a DM, but you can email us at amplifiedmarriage@gmail.com. And as you hear us say all the time, we believe this with all of our heart because it happened to us. We believe that your marriage can be reset,
refreshed,
recharged,
and restored.
Thanks for listening.
Talk to you soon.